Today, a story came out that said Meek Mill's team, his legal team, just suffered a setback. Portions of court transcripts came out that insinuate claims against the judge's misconduct were false. So I get on the radio and I tell that story, and then I get a call from Meek Mill's defense team. You, Jordan, specifically. Jordan Sieve is here today, by the way. Thank you. Can we have one time for Jordan Sieve for joining us?
Thanks for having me.
And for being so quick. And he was like, wait, hold up. Well, you weren't, but your team was like, we heard what you said. We actually have the full transcripts if you would like to see them. I said, I would absolutely like to see them. Can you come now? And 30 minutes later, Jordan is here, full transcripts in hand. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
I don't know how you got here so fast, but I appreciate
Traffic was light.
So maybe you could walk us through it, and
Sure.
so we can understand what's happening, because it gets a little confusing.
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks for letting me come down and
Thank you.
talk about it. And we're, it's a terrible situation that Meek finds himself in jail going on 3 months now, having never missed a court date or committed a crime since he was 19 years old. He's now 30, and he's been in jail since early November based on supposed technical violations. And the issue that we have that we've raised in court filings is we think that Judge Brinkley has taken an unusual interest in his career and has stepped over the line from acting solely as a judge should act and injecting herself into his professional career in ways that are not appropriate. And we've set forth all of those in a motion to have her recuse herself that we filed shortly after the sentencing.
Okay, so what are these? What are we looking at here?
Okay. So
these are transcripts from when to when?
Okay. Well, the background, just a little bit of the background is there's an individual out of Philadelphia named Charlie Mack who used to manage Meek.
Right.
And Meek terminated him in 2011. Meek was on probation after having been convicted when he was 19 years old. He was out of jail on probation and appearing before Judge Brinkley. And starting in 2012, and we'll walk through some of these, Judge Brinkley, the Assistant District Attorney DeSantis, and the probation officer Underwood were repeatedly making references over the course of several years to problems that had arisen on Meek's probation when he had new management, as opposed to when Charlie Mack was his management.
What is the thinking that the judge has some sort of business with Charlie Mack, or some sort of friendship or affiliation? Is that what the concern is? Or
I don't know the answer to that, Angie,
Okay.
but I would ask you, and I would ask your listeners to take a look at these transcripts and ask themselves that question.
Okay.
Because what we see repeatedly is not just a request by the judge or the district attorney or the probation officer for Meek to replace his management. Perhaps they felt for whatever reason that his management wasn't doing the right thing.
Got it.
Which
it wasn't like she was saying, try some other different management. She was like, try Charlie Mack. It was very specific.
Time,
right?
Again, specifically mentioning
At any
him
point
by
mentioning
name.
just a different management? No, just that one. Right.
I'll read you the transcripts, but let's
Okay.
let's
So
actually.
wait, just one more thing before we get to this. So today a story came out and it said basically that these accusations against the judge were false. So the judge, or it wasn't the judge, I don't know if it was the judge or the court, released a section of the transcript that didn't show this. But even if it wasn't in that specific transcript, it doesn't really. That's not proof that this hasn't been happening all along.
That's exactly right,
Right.
and that's
where the confusion is. That's why I don't know, just like media and social media and the way stories, and once they get confusing, people start tuning out, and so you only hear the headlines. And the headline of the story that came out today wasn't true.
right.
And so
let's.
this is why I think it's important. I know that this is a little more meticulous than we tend to get sometimes on my show, but I think it's important to just get the full story, especially in this case, which means a lot to a lot of people.
Absolutely. So, like I said, we have transcripts of the judge's own words, and we can just take a quick look
give us some
through them. So starting in remember, I said
a lot.
I said that Meek terminated his prior manager, Charlie Mack, in 2011.
Right.
So the first transcript that you and I looked at earlier is from December 17th, 2012, and the judge is speaking about issues that had arisen with certain reporting by his current management, and says, The other manager, this is on page 125, the other manager, referring to Charlie Mack, we didn't have no problems scheduling, and we don't have no problem understanding that he was going to come back here in 6 months. He understood all of that. I don't know how or when you all got involved, referring to current management, but he didn't have none of these problems. He didn't have no problems with the other manager, so you all let him down this time. So that's a statement in 2012 from the judge herself, with Meek, of course, there in court. A couple months later, March 2013, page 53 of the transcript, there's a discussion. The court starts talking about prior management, talking about an earlier time, says at the time he had a different manager, though he had, and then Ms. DeSantis, the ADA, says Charlie Mack, and the court says, Charlie Mack, and at some point, anyway, well, Charlie Mack was the person that came up in here during the trial. He came during the trial. He came and provided this court with a contract saying he was going to be working under contract with him, meaning Meek. I say, okay, let's see what happens. You can do what y'all need to do under this contract. And then the judge continues. It was when the defendant got new management that apparently I think there's a typo here, became some miscommunication about travel, and I said that before and I'm saying it again. Everyone has to be on the same page, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another reference to current management and Charlie Mack. An interesting thing happened in...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you...
I was going to say, I understand that. I understand, like, if there was some paperwork issues and they're saying, and the judge is saying, hey, man, your management needs to get on the paperwork. I would understand that if that was the only mention, right?
Precisely.
Yeah. So, but this is year one, right? This is
continuing.
Thing,
right. This continues on, and there was a reference also in 2014, and the court says, and the rules of probation state he can't be around convicted felons. The probation officer says.
The probation officer appointed by the judge.
Correct. Says my understanding is they're not supposed to be. And then Ms. DeSantis, the assistant district attorney, chimes in to remind the judge of what happened a few years back. And this is her direct quote. Your Honor, he's not supposed to be around anyone who is under supervision and be around known felons. Your Honor made an exception back in the day with the management to Mr. Mack. That was the only exception that you made, so we litigated this a long time ago. So according to the DA, an exception was made in connection with the management to Mr. Mack to allow Meek to be around felon. Who exactly that refers to, we don't know, but it's in connection with allowing him to be managed by Mr. Mack. August 18th of 2014, page 62, the assistant district attorney is talking again about Charlie Mack at page 62. She says, Your Honor, obviously I don't disagree with Charlie Mack. When he ran the defendant's campaign, as you know, Robert Williams, Meek Mills, there were no problems. The court, that's right. Ms. DeSantis, so I applaud Mr. Mack. The court, when Mr. Mack had him, there were no problems. That's 2014. So now, cut to this. Meek's now standing before the judge for a violation of probation hearing that's gone on for 4 days. It's February 5th, 2016. He's in court. This is prior to the conference in the chambers that we talked about a moment ago. Ms. DeSantis, the assistant district attorney, says in open court to Meek, are you willing to work with Charlie Mack? Because when he managed the defendant many, many years ago, things were run very smoothly, and the judge's orders were completely adhered to down to a T, to the point where Mr. Mack actually recited back to the judge what her orders were. And that seems to be a glitch that we have had since 2012 until now. Would you two work together as a team? And you do work together in your current job. You work together with other artists, is that correct? And now there's a discussion. He's also who took me to meet Meek in the first place, so I know Charlie. I work with him. He's a very big influence. So in open court, the assistant district attorney is talking about working, suggesting again that there be working with Charlie Mack. So the reason why I point that statement out is shortly thereafter, they're in the judge's chambers in this meeting that we talked about. And I've got, as you can see here, I've got 20 or so different references to Charlie Mack by the probation officer or the assistant district attorney. I don't want to go through all of them. You know, you and I have talked about them.
And I have looked at them.
But,
yeah.
But there are a few that I
go
think
on and on and on and on.
are very important. Because to your point, Angie, some of the press that's come out has been reporting, well, the judge didn't say anything in this transcript that just got released about how he should replace current management with Charlie Mack. And what happened is in this transcript, the assistant district attorney makes very clear on page 26 here, on page 27, excuse me, the assistant district attorney, in referring to the probation officer, says, the judge selected her for a reason. We went through a lot of probation officers. So it's very clear to Meek standing there that this is the hand-selected probation officer. The judge hand-selected her. And what does this probation officer say in this conference on page 24? And again, I'm reading directly. I'm not making up these words. Working with Charlie Mack, hands down, he is phenomenal. Kuna Howard, Phil Smith, those are people involved in Meek's management. They continue to get you back to where you are. Those are the guys that are a problem for you because they don't understand this is what the judge wants, the judge's mission, what she wants. They go outside of what the judge asks for. Charlie said, referencing Charlie Mack, quote, I worked with Your Honor 5 years ago. And then there's further discussion of Charlie Mack. This goes on in this transcript. The judge doesn't stop either of them at that point in time and say to either of them, we shouldn't be discussing management, or no, that's not my mission, that's not what I want. The judge makes a statement at the very end, and it's been quoted in a lot of the stories, I think, to paint the picture.
I don't want to make it sound like I'm telling you what your management should be.
Right, but I guess I would ask the question a different way. Where were those statements for the last 5 years that Meek was listening to the judge and the assistant district attorney in open court saying things ran great with Charlie Mack?
Got it. Yeah. No, I get that.
So if you put yourself in Meek's position, he's fighting for his liberty. He hears these statements. What's the only logical conclusion? Put yourself in his shoes. The only logical conclusion to draw from that is this is what the judge, the district attorney, and the probation officer want.
So the thinking is that she is too personally connected to this case at this point, right? And
well, I think what we've said in our filings is she's assumed a role that goes beyond the judge's judicial function in getting involved in things like his management and all. It's just simply not appropriate, and she can't fairly preside over this case, which is why we sought recusal, a motion that she still to this day, 2.5 months later, hasn't responded to.
Oh, no response at all?
No response.
Wow. I had read a story that they were investigating her, that the FBI was investigating whether there was some, I guess, inappropriate or...
I can't comment on whether there is or is not an investigation.
But you heard about it, though.
I've read the press, but I can't
I've read
comment.
The press. So what happens now? Doesn't she have to respond, or no? She doesn't have to respond.
Well, there's an appellate process.
Okay.
And this will sort itself out in the appellate process, but
can't that be dragged?
It certainly is, and all the while, Meek is in jail.
Right.
So we're working hard on a lot of different legal angles and legal strategies to try and get him freed and get this unjust sentence overturned.
Do you feel confident about the appeal?
We are hopeful that the appellate court is going to see the injustice of this sentence. There have been rallies, there have been op-eds written, there have been countless
Justice for Meek.
For Meek,
and a lot of really prominent people, especially in Philly too, that have really stood
because
up.
I think this highlights a broader issue, which is the clogging of the jails, particularly in Pennsylvania. I don't have the statistics at hand, but the clogging of the jails with people who didn't commit another crime but violated probation. I mean, the numbers are staggering. I believe it's upwards of 50% of people in jails in either Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, I don't recall offhand, are there on probation violations and not for having committed an additional crime like Meek. He committed his crime. He did his time. He's been on probation since he got out of jail, since he was 20 years old.
I know.
and he's now 30. He's a successful artist. He's contributing to the community. He's got a 6-year-old child. His mother lives nearby him in South Jersey. He's close with his family. He's close with his child. He's been in jail for 3 months based on some alleged technical violations that shouldn't have sent them there.
Yeah, that's what pisses me off. Every time I post something about it or I see something written up, I skim the comments. And there is, there's people that want him to be accountable for not, to the T following up with his, I guess, whatever the probation terms were. And, but I guess everybody's always going to have something to say about something. But to me, it's about the time fitting the crime. And just for clarity, just about what happened that got him here in the first place. Because that's like I said, it's a common thing. Why was he even in touch with law? So there was the airport incident, right? In St. Louis. These are the things that put him back in front of the judge in the first place, right? It was the airport incident, and it was the incident on the bicycles.
There was an arrest in New York for popping a wheelie on a motorbike during a video shoot.
Right.
And there were, it was not until this fall that the judge requested this violation of probation hearing. The assistant district attorney and the probation officer were not requesting that Meek be sent back to jail. The judge requested the violation of probation hearing. And
based on what? Based on this,
well, based on she based it off of the St. Louis incident, which happened, by the way, in March. The violation hearing was in November. The New York arrest, which took place in August. And then, a few other things that she put forward on the record. But really, those were the two principal things.
So what happened at the airport?
So
that was March.
Meek gets off a plane in St. Louis relatively late at night. He said he was, tired, not looking and feeling his best. And a couple of guys that worked at the airport stopped him and asked for a selfie, and he didn't want to do it. He wasn't feeling great. The next day, after performing, they came back, and the same guys that work in the airport were there. And Meek was actually sitting in the car. I've seen the security footage from the airport. Meek is actually sitting in the car outside. And as I understand it, the airport workers get into an altercation, jump some of Meek's friends, and have one of his friends, who's like a little brother to Meek, on the floor, and they're beating him pretty badly. And Meek hears this and jumps out of the car to help defend this guy, his sort of little brother. The airport police issued essentially a citation to Meek. They didn't arrest him. He made his flight. He left that evening. And ultimately, that case was dropped by the prosecutor in St. Louis. There were no charges because they reviewed the footage. They looked at
So he thought that was past him, behind him.
Right.
It was
an
incident,
then
right?
He's in New York this past summer, and he's going, he's on a motorbike, and pops a wheelie, and it's captured on some video footage that shows up on Instagram. The next day, he's at a charity basketball game with some kids, and Joe will tell this story like I can't, but 4 or 5 police cars, perhaps more, roll up to arrest Meek.
Because they saw the video of him in the bike.
So it wasn't even that the police saw this, arrested him on the spot. Ultimately, Joe, representing him here in New York, gets the case, what's called an adjournment in contemplation of dismissal. Basically, they kick out the hearing date and say, as long as you don't get into trouble, we'll dismiss this. So that's what happened there. So you have 2 incidents that essentially amount to nothing. And you have a couple other things that the judge was concerned about. Meek was very open, and this was discussed in court. He had a dental issue, and he had some painkiller addictions after that. He got treatment for it, both in-home treatment in Atlanta and then in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. The judge claimed at his violation hearing that she didn't know that he was receiving treatment in Atlanta. And we produced at the hearing and introduced emails to the judge with his schedule showing medical treatment in Atlanta, discussed with the judge, discussed with the probation department. and showing that the email went to the judge. The judge claimed to have not received it. It was also emailed to the DA's office. The DA
Received it.
confirmed during the hearing in November that their office had received it, but the judge said that she wasn't aware of it. I could go on
she called a
and on.
hearing based on these
based
things.
on these things, and she said in her statement that there were posts on social media that she didn't like, and so nothing. He didn't commit a crime. He didn't miss a court date. The judge was.
What is Meek's or his team's? What is Meek's stance on what the? I don't know if there should be some sort of penalty for that.
Well, I think the better. I would answer that by saying the assistant district attorney and the probation officer supervising him both said in open court and in statements in written submissions to the court that they didn't believe sending him to prison was necessary or appropriate. So
it was just the judge.
It was, and ultimately it's the judge's decision. And these are different assistant district attorney and probation officer than the ones that we were discussing in the transcripts today.
We were focusing mostly today because of the story that came out about the management choice and her having an input on the management choice. But there were other instances that were inappropriate that you guys cited. Yes.
Yes, we've cited a number of instances. For example, the judge really taking personal umbrage at when Meek did things that she perceived as a slight, indicating you're not just disappointing, your fans, you're disappointing me. How do you think I feel? These are simply. The judge is supposed to be a fair and impartial arbiter of the proceedings in the courtroom and not be emotionally invested.
Is that something that happens a lot when somebody's on a case this long? Is that something that you guys see? I know I'm going off topic, but I'm curious about that. If that's something that is commonly seen on a case that goes on this long.
Well, I think if a case goes on for a long time, certainly everyone involved in the case, has lived with it for a long time. But the judge's role, judges are of course human beings, and they will react to things in front of them. But they're supposed to be fair and impartial and decide cases based on the facts and the law presented to them and not based on anything other than that.
Why not just step aside at this point? I guess that leaves a mark on her.
Certainly, we think the appropriate determination after this sentence in November would have been for the judge to step aside, hand it off to another judge to decide whether it was proper for her to hear it in the first instance or whether this sentence was proper. That's all we're looking for, is a fair and impartial hearing on this, and we don't believe that's what Meek has gotten over the years.
Is it possible that this appeal could go on so long that he serves this whole sentence?
Anything is possible, but we don't believe that's likely. We believe the appeal will play itself out over the next few months, and unfortunately, Meek's sentence runs 2 to 4 years.
Yeah. Have you seen him?
I have. I visited him in jail.
How's he doing?
He's doing as well as you can expect. There's been obviously a lot of talk about the Eagles celebrating to his music and practicing
that
to
made
his
me
music.
so.
And
I don't know. That just touched me so much.
He's really taken to that, and he's a Philly guy through and through, and he's holding up, and he wants justice. He wants to get out of jail, and he wants this sentence thrown out, which is what we all want.
And I know that he just made a donation to Colin Kaepernick's
yes.
foundation, which I think is great.
And this is not a one-off thing that he's doing.
Right. It's not like, look at me, I'm in jail. Let me do
Yeah,
something
I mean,
nice.
every year he runs a turkey drive, handing out turkeys in the Philly community before Thanksgiving. Even though he was in jail this year, he still made sure that went forward. This is what he does. He's been very community service oriented over the last several years, and it's just it's a terrible situation that his talent and his good deeds for the community are not being fostered.
When he gets out, will he still be on probation?
Well, it really depends. It really depends how it plays out, because there are a lot of variables. We're hoping the whole sentence will be thrown out and he'll be free and clear. out of jail and no more probation, no more reporting. But we'll see.
I hope so too. Well, thank you for coming today and so quickly.
My pleasure.
And for responding. And do I keep these? Are these like confidential? Are these like for everybody to see?
They're public records.
Are they public records?
Yes.
So can I post these? And
most of them have been. Yes, most of
Okay.
them have been filed already on the docket, and the transcript from yesterday was purchased just like you purchased it. Everyone can purchase it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.